Welcome to WonderTalk number 17, where I explore my character's backstory as I play through the story in game Star Wars: The Old Republic. In this series, we talk a little more about his lore and his background, not necessarily covered in the game's actual story. In the last proper WonderTalk episode, number 16 was kind of cheating because it was right after a flashpoint, I asked you guys about Javiik's mother. What does she look like? Was my most important question. If you're new to this series, I ask questions and you guys get to chime in the comments, and I often use suggestions or ideas from the comments to actually add into my character's backstory. This isn't just my character's story, this is our story. GameSpect said, about Javiik's mother, I imagine her as a sweet white kitty. She had her own tragic experience because her parents were Force users and the Sith killed them because they wouldn't join the Academy, hence why she tried to hide it. I don't think I want to keep her own story quite so tragic, though that would definitely explain why she tries to hide her Force powers. Maybe something did happen with her parents that caused her to want to hide it more than just trying to keep Javiik safe. But GameSpect wasn't the only one who thought maybe Mrs. Javiik looks very pale or white-colored. Optical Spark said, for a name, I'd suggest Sheeva. I'd say she has white fur with maybe some black spots. Her eyes could be the same color as her son's, and maybe she talked in the same calm manner as he does too. I don't think she has as much of an imposing stature as Javiik, but is rather slim and a little smaller. She's a very calm person and doesn't like violence at all because she saw what the Sith were like when they were at the Sith-friendly houses in Alderaan. Maybe she saw someone being executed for no reason at all. Let's face it, Sith aren't the nicest people. And I really like Optical's idea of what Mrs. Javiik could be. And you know what? Let's call her Sheeva. Javiik's mother is now named Sheeva. Oh my god, I had to pause that because I forgot Javiik's last name. This is what happens when you make a last name and never use it. Her name will be Sheeva Vutta. Not exactly rolling off the tongue, but it's a family name. What can you say? So now we know a little of what she looks like. She doesn't have Javiik's wonderful, glorious dark fur. But she does have the same color eyes as he did before they started going dark side. I think his eyes were kind of a yellowish color. But we can also dig into what was she like in terms of Force powers. This is from Assassin's Den. The thing to remember about an untrained Force sensitive is that when powers manifest, it will be based around their current life focus. For example, a Force-sensitive gladiator is going to be exhibiting Force-based physical augmentation to boost their strength, speed, and stamina. A Force-sensitive gambler will be unusually lucky. A politician will be extremely charismatic. Force-sensitive scientists will always know when the next discovery is over the horizon, etc. So, based on what has been established about Javiik's mother so far, as she's a free trader who likely owns a starship and can maintain it, she'd have a head for numbers, an understanding of mechanics, and the ability to see trends. Two of those three can trend towards a focus on foresight, allowing her to glimpse the future for herself and Javiik, so she could leave a message for her son warning him about some vague threats that she could partially see. So I really like the idea of what Assassin's Den was saying, that she didn't exhibit her Force powers in any flashy kinds of ways, but just kind of used them subtly, naturally in her own business. Mr. Game Utopia didn't agree that she was a light-colored Cathar, but they did have lots to say about Javiik's mother. I think Javiik's mother should be more slender and gentle Cathar. The strength and look could be more from his father, but maybe the fur color could be from his mother. For background, I think Javiik's mother could be descendant of farmers who lived on the planet Alderaan for many generations, but at some point in the lineage she also knew or have learned from her parents or grandparents, in this case Javiik's grandparents or his great-grandparents, that their family was Force sensitive and served for the Empire back in the day of Lord Calig, or in other words, the era of Knights of the Old Republic. I think it's even further back than that. Through WonderTalk number 14, where I was asking, is Javiik blood related, we've established that Javiik is indeed blood related to Minor Sith Inquisitor stories, to the you-know-who Lord. So he would have to have a Cathar ancestor somewhere along the line be close, intimate friends with Lord Calig so they could make a family tree. And so this is what Mr. Game Utopia's idea about that was. Maybe her ancestor was a Cathar woman who was strong and tough, fell in love with Lord Calig, and eventually she gave birth to a Cathar child, who started the whole generation of farmers in Javik's family, on the mother's side at least, for reasons unknown, or if you want to hear the reason, it is to escape from a war where the Sith Empire of the time was losing to the Republic. I don't know the lore of that time, it was too long ago for my interests. Mr. Game Utopia also had a fun idea about baby Javiik. She learned or noticed that her son, Javiik, can use the Force because she saw him playing with his toy by levitating it with use of the Force. To make sure that he doesn't get taken away from the Empire, or from her by the Empire, she keeps an eye on her son at all times and never lets anyone see him using the Force. Luckily for her, she was successful in this for years as Javiik grew older until the time they got separated and sold into slavery. I know you said in your past videos, at least one of them, that Javiik manifested his Force powers after he became a slave, and he found out about it when he was on Dromund Kaas, but that doesn't mean that was the first time he awakened the Force power. Maybe he awoke his Force powers when he was a baby, and just didn't remember about it because, well, he was a baby. And that is a great idea, because we know that often Force users either have a traumatic event that's like, boom, Force powers, wah, crazy, gotta use them now, and they're like awakened, or that they more often kind of just leak out over time. We see this kind of phenomena in the wonderful Blur trailer for Star Wars The Old Republic with little young Valen in the Knights of the Fallen Empire trailer. I don't remember what it's called. But it's a really fun trailer, and you get to see a very powerful young Force user kind of grow into her explosive powers. And one of the first things she does is kind of plays with a toy using the Force. And it's in a Force family, so they didn't really have to hide it or anything. Their troubles were an entirely different matter. Roadkills78 had a suggestion for the name. The name Kiva comes to mind. Her namesake comes from an underground ceremonial room that ancient Native Americans used. That is also a really pretty name. I thought it was pretty funny that one suggestion was Sheeva and another was Kiva, and I really like them both. I just chose Sheeva because it was first and I like them both equally, but I think I'm gonna put Kiva away on the side somewhere. Maybe one day Javiik will have children and Kiva can be his daughter? I don't know. It's like a combination of Sheeva and Calig. Yes! So Orion Star had a kind of interesting idea about where Javik's mom got her Force powers from. Javik's mom got her Force powers when she was 12 to 16 years old when Jedi gave her his blood to save her life, reason why she was at the time sick and marked to terminal illness, like blood poison by maybe a reactor leak or something. That's how Javik's mom got Force powers. And that's a really fun idea. I don't know if Force powers can be transferred to one person from the other. I don't think a blood transfusion would do it, but there's a whole midichlorian thing, so I'm not entirely sure. I need some lore love down below. The Master Gaming Dude also had a comment about the size of Javik's mother. They said, I also like the idea of her being a small woman and quite fragile too, kind of like Anakin's mother. And I really like that comparison because in the movie, Anakin's mother is a huge focus of Anakin's grief and his anger and his attachment to Tatooine. So it's just a very neat comparison. Javiik is definitely not going through the same stuff that Anakin did. This is not pod racing. But they both kind of have a bit of a similar journey. All of a sudden Force powers, all of a sudden being taken from their home, slavery, although Anakin was probably since he was very young or before he was born, versus Javiik, who is more recently. Both of them try and go save their mother. I'm really hoping that Javik's going to be a little more successful. I think he will be. I don't think the situation is quite as dire as Anakin's mum's. Anna Sumner had an idea of what her relationship with her family is, what Sheeva's relationship with her family. She cares deeply about her family and does everything she can to keep it safe, so she was devastated when Javiik was captured. And I think that really hits the nail on the head. She's definitely the matriarchal figure. She's strong, but small. She loves her family. She works hard for her business, and she'd do anything for them. I can't imagine the way she feels about not only not having her husband around anymore, but also having her son put into slavery, and there's nothing she could do to stop it at all. Lord of the Betrayed also had a wonderful and very similar name for Javik's mom. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Their suggestion was Shavira, and they also wanted her to be the one related to Calig, so I think I'm just going to keep that canon. She was a woman who knew how to persuade potential customers into entering a trade agreement with her or someone of her family. Having been born with some power in the Force, she had found that her natural charisma could be enhanced through powers of persuasion the Force made possible. She came to grow fond of her powers and slightly lean towards the dark side, coming to view others outside her family as lesser or even enemies. Very cool. They mentioned it was kind of inspired by Game of Thrones Cersei. To be used to their benefit and happiness, a bit like the Lannisters. Yet when the conflict between the Sith Empire and Galactic Republic started coming to even peaceful Alderaan, she knew she had to be careful with her powers as to not reveal her true nature. She gave birth to a litter of 3 infants, but since from the start the 2 of them, Javiik and her sister Revi, were strong in the Force. I hadn't read this comic, I didn't realize there was a whole family. Okay, we're just going to keep it at Javiik for now. I don't think I'm going to pop in any secret sisters or brothers. I was very interested in doing this at first, but I don't know, it feels kind of as fun as the idea is of like, Javik's sister Kiva. She is a Dark Lord as well. No, she became a Jedi. I don't know, it just feels like everyone has a magic sister or brother. I think I'm just gonna keep him an only child. Maybe he'll find some interesting friends along the way that can kind of take that part. But if you get the chance, go back to episode 15 and read Lord of the Betrayed's story. It's kind of like a cool little fan fiction tying into all kinds of Star Wars, the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic lore. This is an idea from Laura Doan. Maybe Javik's mother's Force powers had a part in getting him to become a page for House Thule, which eventually helped him become Sith? She could have 1, seen that his presence in House Thule would eventually lead him to becoming strong enough to defend himself and thrive in the galaxy, and 2, know the things to say to help him gain favor with the House. And that is very likely that she did subtly influence House Thule to allow Javiik to become a page. Like, it's not a totally crazy thing to say that he was a page in the House. A page is kind of like step up from a servant, maybe. But she probably did use a little bit that Force charisma to get him in. And Coffee for Naught also liked the idea of her using her Force powers in business. I like the idea that she was a smaller woman and she was very sly, but also fairly honest. While she would suppress her Force powers, she would likely use them on occasion when she felt the need. She was a businesswoman, but was also home fairly often, but Javik's dad would often ask her for trading advice, or he would send her in his steed to trade deal. And sometimes in these trade deals, if the family was at risk of taking a big financial hit, or were deathly low on funds, she would use Force persuasion, less so imposing her will and just making light suggestions due to her weak affinity to the Force. Though even without the Force, she was a skilled trader due to her growing up fairly poor initially and working her way up to the middle class. She was extremely protective and picky about who watched and took care of Javiik, though. She also likely kept her Force powers hidden from the father. So that's also a really fun idea to play with. What do you do if maybe you know in your ancestry line you were related to an incredibly powerful and, as far as I can tell, not exactly a nice guy, Sith Lord. You know that that power has been passed down to you and you occasionally use it, not exactly on the light side of the Force. Not the worst thing in the world. She's not going around throwing Force lightning balls out, but she's not exactly using it to heal the sick either. Do you think she would tell Javik's dad about the fact that Javiik, she sensed Force powers in him? Do you think she told him about whether she had them herself? I'm kind of getting the idea that Javik's dad was out of the loop on this one. I'm gonna say for sure in our canon little story that Javik's father was not Force sensitive. He was a soldier, a trader, but he did not have any affinity for the Force, so he wouldn't have sensed it from either of them. The only way he would know is if she told him, or if he caught them in the act, I guess. I don't think he would ever notice her. He would just assume it was her natural charisma, you know, the thing I fell in love with so many years ago. But maybe he caught little Javiik, or maybe he caught her doing something a little more a little more out of character. I don't know. So what do you guys think? Do you think that Javik's father knew he was force sensitive? That Javik's mother was force sensitive as well? Or do you think whenever he finds out, it's going to be as big a surprise, a huge surprise to him as well? So leave your thoughts in the comments below. Did Javik's father know Javik's mother was force sensitive? Did he know that Javiik was force sensitive? I'll see you guys on the next episode of Wonder Talk.